I have started recording. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to jump straight in because I know you're a busy man. And just to give you a background in terms of us, we run a website called Retro
I
Dodo.
know all about
We're
Retro Dodo. I don't need background. I'm all set.
Oh,
Oh
brilliant.
man, that's what I like to hear.
Fantastic. All right, let's just jump in and talk about Mod Retro. I'm really excited to have you. Thank you for joining us. I know you're a busy man, and I just want to say thank you for creating an awesome product that which our audience is certainly going to enjoy. In terms of just how the podcast usually runs, just a brief introduction into what you've done in the past and what you're currently building.
Sure. So most people know me as the Oculus guy. I started a company called Oculus VR when I was 19 years old. It was kind of the culmination of virtual reality headset development that I'd been doing as a hobby since I was 15. And that company ended up doing really well. We sold millions of virtual reality headsets. I sold it to Facebook for a lot of money, and that was how I kind of got the money to be able to go and do all kinds of other cool stuff. These days, I work in the national security space, building autonomous weapons, sensors, AI fighter jets for the Air Force, all kinds of cool stuff on that side. And happy to talk about that if you want. But I think what most of what we're here to talk about is something most people don't really know about me, which is that before I started Oculus VR, the first thing I ever did was started ModRetro. And ModRetro I started when I was a teenager. It was an online community for people who wanted to combine the best of modern technology with retro game systems, hardware, computers, all kinds of stuff. And the real focus of the site was people building portable versions of home game consoles in particular. So the hobby, we call it portabilizing. And also doing a lot of interesting Game Boy modifications. The types of, for example, backlit display modifications that are now like a whole cottage industry were actually pioneered largely by ModRetro members. Myself personally, I was the first person to ever LED backlight a Game Boy of any kind. I was also the first person to backlight, as far as I know, a Game Boy Pocket in an aftermarket way, not including, of course, the Game Boy Light. Nintendo,
much needed thing,
Nintendo beat me to that. Beat me to that. But that was kind of the first thing that I fell in love with doing. And we at one point, ModRetro was doing millions of page views a month. We were doing a really good job of kind of pitching the completed projects of our members to the tech blogs like Engadget and Gizmodo and Joystick and all the other guys who are now dead and gone. But I kind of did that for years and then really focused on Oculus, really focused on Anduril. But me and my buddies have had for years this kind of dream of reviving ModRetro. And we've been working on this side project of building the ultimate tribute to the Nintendo Game Boy, kind of answering the question, what would you do if you made a Game Boy where cost was no object and your goal is not to just make a Game Boy handheld, a Game Boy compatible handheld. People have made knockoffs of various types, and people have made like interesting FPGA emulation stuff. People have made actual literal knockoffs of the Game Boy Color hardware on dedicated chips. But we said, okay, well, what would you do if you're trying to build something that's like an heirloom, where it's not just the next Game Boy clone, but it's the last one. It's the one where you say, yep,
everlasting.
They did it perfectly. It's the last step. Like in 20 years, I'm hoping that nobody's done better than the thing that I think we're going to talk about today, which is the ModRetro Chromatic, which is the culmination of that kind of 10-year side project of me and my buddies, and we're finally getting it out there. This ultimate tribute to the Game Boy.
Yeah, I want to get onto that in detail, obviously, very soon. But I wonder if you could, like, for our listeners who are kind of interested in you as a person as well, like, you created ModRetro when you were younger. What learnings have you taken from making ModRetro as a teenager through to being an entrepreneur now with all the different projects that you do? What's one thing or multiple things that you've taken through the journey from starting that company all those years ago to everything you do now?
Well, if it was one thing, I guess most people could talk about the learnings, just in terms of what they've learned personally. But the most interesting thing about ModRetro and its relevance to Oculus and even Anduril is actually, I didn't just take the learnings with me. I literally took the people. So, we were just a bunch of kids. And it was interesting because ModRetro, it was an all-volunteer moderator staff and administrative staff. And we I think it attracted a certain type of person who was very self-motivated, interested in sharing their work with others, building things for the sake of building things, not because they were forced to do it. This wasn't, we weren't a bunch of kids who were doing school engineering projects. We were off on our own doing this with our own money on our own time because we just loved doing it. And actually, much of the original Oculus hardware engineering team, including the very first employees, were actually people from ModRetro. I literally hit them up. Some of these
That's
people.
amazing.
I was hitting people up that I'd never even met in real life. I said, hey, I'm starting this VR company. I've figured out how to make virtual reality headsets that are cheaper and better than anyone else, and I want you to be part of it. In fact, the first Oculus employee was a guy named Chris Dykes, whose handle was Mario on ModRetro. And he was one of the administrators on ModRetro, and I hit him up one day on Skype because that's what one used
Good old
at the
Skype.
time.
Yeah.
On Skype. I said, Chris, what are you doing? What are you doing this summer? He said, well, I'm going to be working at this local pizza place and getting ready to start going to college in fall. I said, no, you're not doing either of those things. You're going to come work for me, and we're going to build the world's greatest virtual reality headset. And the crazy thing is, he agreed. And he told his mom, hey, Mom, I'm moving out to go live with my internet friend, Palmer. And she thought he was just like screwing around. But that was on a Friday. And on Monday, I showed up in my minivan. We loaded up all of his stuff, got his soldering irons, and all his gear, piled it into the van, and then we started living in a now condemned motel. And that was really the beginning of Oculus. So I guess there's a lot of learnings that I have, but like the biggest learning I guess I had was it's really good to count on people that you already know are trustworthy and that you know that you can count on. These, I can't imagine how Oculus or Andro would have gone if I had instead tried to start from scratch, finding people that I trusted, and that's probably one of the biggest learnings. But I will say, obviously, having been through the Oculus experience of prototyping novel hardware, but also building consumer hardware at a scale of millions of units, it really gives you an understanding of how to make products and how to ship them on time, which I'm glad I have that experience, because if I was doing this for the first time with the Chromatic, I guarantee you people would not be getting it on time. There is a learning curve to this stuff.
That's still happening now with a lot of manufacturers that are building handhelds.
What was the last hardware project of this kind of type that shipped on time? I'd say the problem with these passion projects is they tend to attract. I don't want to put people down, but like they attract people who don't have experience shipping millions of units of consumer hardware. It kind of attracts the Palmer Luckies of the 2000s rather than the Palmer Luckies of the 2020s. If that makes sense.
I want to move on to the Chromatic, because that's what a lot of our audience is pretty much obsessed with over the last few months. Starting with the inspiration, why the Game Boy / Game Boy Color? Why not the Neo Geo Pocket or the Sega Game Gear, for example?
Sure. I mean, I would love to come up with all kinds of interesting justifications, like market research or what people want. It's what I want. I'm doing this for me. And I think I was pretty clear about that in the launch video. I said, look, this does not make economic sense. This is not going to make me money. I am losing money by doing this, by selling this, but my goal is to bring something into the world that wouldn't exist otherwise. And that's why also people, like, there's a question of why not Neo Geo Pocket Color, or, why not Game Gear? But people all say, well, why not also allow it to be like a Super Nintendo handheld? Why not make a general purpose FPGA gaming handheld? And I'd say there's two reasons. One, I like to do things that other people aren't really doing well. And I think those are areas that have been quite well addressed and will continue to be. And there will always be new advancements. In my case, I love the Game Boy and I love the Game Boy Color. It's what I grew up with. A lot of my favorite games growing up with them on. I'm a big Pokemon fan. Gen 2 Pokemon was far and away the superior generation in the series.
Just that shirt is fantastic as well.
Gen 3 gets an honorable mention as the one that actually locked in the battle system to the point where it's all like that. That's what we're dealing with today. So, but I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it because that's what I loved. And I'd say maybe ModRetro does do Neo Geo or Game Gear someday.
If you do a Game Gear, I'll be a very, very happy man. It was my first ever handheld console, and at the time, the technology was incredible, and I think it was like pretty much Sega at its finest.
You must have been the rich kid on the block, grinding through all your AA batteries every hour.
Cheers, Daddy. Yeah.
He wore it around his neck like a big medallion when he was walking around the playground. 100%.
That's why I've got a hunchback.
I love the Game Gear. You know, it's a quick digression, but there was a project that me and a couple other guys on ModRetro were working on back in the 2000s, and it was the late 2000s. It would have been like 2009, 2010 actually. And it was to build a Nintendo 64 handheld using only technology that existed at the time of the Nintendo 64. So a little different than what we were usually doing, where we were using more modern LCDs and where we were using more modern batteries. It was literally using like NiCad batteries from RC cars that existed at the time of the N64. It was using one of the 5-inch 320 by 240 PS1 LCDs, the ones you could clip onto the console so you could play it while it was, while you're camping or in the car. And so the idea was, what if we build a Nintendo 64 handheld kind of along the lines of what Nintendo could have literally built at the time in the late 90s? And we always thought that would have been the coolest Game Gear competitor of all time, even more power hungry. But I mean, could you imagine if the Nintendo could have done it? I know handhelds back then were smaller, but like, the Game Gear was huge, and you look at you look at like the size of a Wii U gamepad or like even a Switch, and you realize, dang, Nintendo could have released a Nintendo 64 portable handheld in the 1990s with that technology. What a cool alternate universe that would have been.
I would sell my left arm for that. Honestly, I would love that. I'd be incredible.
Well, there were people in Nintendo who were pushing for it. I've actually spoken with some of them. Oh yeah, so
nice.
One of the coolest things about getting to be the Oculus guy is that I got to work with a lot of game developers and game studios. But by the way, is also another asset that's coming back around for ModRetro. I think one of the reasons we're getting all these studios to work with us on, we're bundling it with Tetris out of the gate. Yeah. But we're also partnering with a lot of studios, some of which we've announced, some not, to re-release old Game Boy games, make new entrants in these large IP franchises. To release new Game Boy titles. But a lot of that comes from the fact that I built these connections in the Oculus days. I got to go to Japan and meet with a lot of game developers, including people who've been around since the 90s. And
amazing.
There were a bunch of people who were pushing Nintendo to do a handheld Nintendo 64. Including
why didn't they? Do you know why they didn't do that? Just costs and they didn't.
I think it didn't fit with with kind of the philosophy of Nintendo, which famously has been lateral thinking with withered technology, or rather the Japanese words that roughly translate to that. And they've, I'd say the Nintendo 64 was not that. It was a very advanced system for the time. But I think, you got to also remember the Nintendo 64 wasn't around for very long. It was a quite short-lived system in comparison to many others, and so I think it was also a thing that they were planning on moving on. The reason people were pushing for it inside of Nintendo and then also external developers was really just they thought they could get a bigger market for their existing Nintendo 64 titles, right? So if I'm a Nintendo 64 developer and I've launched my game, and let's say I've saturated it where I've kind of sold to every person who owns a Nintendo 64 and I'm in the long tail of like trickle sales, I know that if they reach out to this new audience of people who's buying it as a handheld, they're going to go and they're going to buy a lot of the top games, and that's going to turn into probably a big sales bump for me. So it's an interesting what if. It's something I ponder all the time.
So let's bring it back to the Chromatic then. I could talk about N64 all day, but I know everyone wants to hear about this, and we're really excited to talk about it with you as well. So I want to get inside your brain for a second. I want to talk about the what's, how's, and whys. Why you designed the product the way you did, the unique pixel accurate display, the volume wheel, the specific colors you've chosen for each of the designs, and and the patterns on there. Just I want this an opportunity for you to just go into all the thoughts you've had on how you designed the product the way you've done, and the conscious choices that you made in that in the process.
Sure. I think that the kind of thought process was on every single aspect. To answer the question, what would you do if you were doing this the very best way? So at no point, maybe recognizing that you're doing irrational things, right? So here's a great example. We should have just used Gorilla Glass. It's really nice. The newest the latest generation Gorilla Glass is it's affordable, it's mass producible. There's lots of vendors who can work with it quite easily, and it's very scratch resistant. But lab-grown sapphire crystal is even more scratch resistant, and it's even harder. And so we said, you know what? If you're really trying to make the ultimate Game Boy, you're not going to compromise. You're going to use lab-grown sapphire crystals as your front lens. And not only are you going to use it as your front lens, you're actually going to laminate it to the display to make sure that you get that perfect transmission with absolutely no reflection. That becomes very hard to it. And you say, well, how are you going to align this properly? It's hard for even a lot of phone companies to do a good enough job. And we said, no, we're just going to do it. Same thing with the display. It would have been so easy to do what a lot of other systems have done, which is use displays that are already out there, use existing displays. It would have been easy to use one of, let's say, the displays that people are regularly, modding Game Boys with, where they have these displays that are higher resolution. They take the video feed, they buffer it, they scale it up, and then they put it to the display. The problem is you're introducing latency in that scaling process. The pixel structure is no longer accurate, which is actually a pretty big problem when you have a lot of these games that were relying on the subpixel structure itself to actually add to the effective detail of the game. Basically subpixel aware sprites were a thing that a lot of the best artists were taking advantage of. So you've got the latency issues, you've got the art reproduction issues, you've also got color reproduction issues where one of the things we did is rather than with an LCD, you have these kind of color filters installed on the panel. LCDs are basically all monochrome is the real secret. They're monochrome liquid crystal filters, and then you have a color filter on top that can change it to red or green or blue. There's been an enormous amount of money, billions of dollars over the course of decades, invested into making color filters that are very, very monochromatic. In other words, reproducing red, green, and blue light very, very perfectly so that you can have a wide color gamut, high color accuracy. In our case, we wanted the opposite. The original Game Boy Color display was actually very inaccurate and hugely skewed because it was pretty cheap technology even at the time. They were trying to make something affordable. And so, if you put Pokemon Gold or Silver onto a Game Boy Color and you watch the intro video and you have that bit where Lapras swims by on the screen, it's a nice skin tone belly, on Lapras. And if you put that on a modern system, it's a bright garish yellow. And that's because that's what the developers had to do to get that skin tone. They had to have the RGB values that added up to bright yellow. And so we said, look, the only way we're going to do this correctly is if we purposely make a custom display, custom color filters that mimic the poor color reproduction of the original Game Boy and skew all the colors in various directions, because then those work in conjunction with the original cartridges to actually give you the right color. So that's just the display side. The rest is a lot easier. What should the shell be? Well, magnesium aluminum alloy is very, very cheap. It's very, very stiff. It's very, very light. There's a reason that it's so widely used in industry. It's a very challenging material to work with. I think that's actually, once you're making a lot of it and you've done the tooling, it's not so hard to keep making them. But magnesium is a lot of work to get right versus plastic or let's say milled aluminum. But you can get much thinner wall thicknesses. It can be much stiffer for the weight. And so we said, you know what? We're just going to take on the work. We're going to take on the work of using magnesium. And then with the buttons, it would have been so easy to just use ABS plastic or make them out of metal. But there's a lot of reasons you don't want metal buttons. We can get into it if you want. I used to be a fan of metal buttons, but I'm since a convert back.
Okay, that's interesting.
But we're using PBT plastic, which you might be familiar is used in a lot of really high-end mechanical keyboards because it's a very hard-wearing plastic. It's very, very it holds its surface finish. It can hold its color. It has a really nice feel to it. It's very, very solid, very, very rigid. And so just every design decision, if you're going to name, whether it's the audio, the way we did the audio, the way that we developed the display, the way that we developed the shell, the way that we developed the controls, every part was trying to do the very, very best thing. And then you end up with this bit at the end where it's a lot more expensive than it strictly needs to be. But I'll tell you this, nobody's going to do a better job, at least of being a Game Boy. I think there's people who point and say, oh, well, why is this thing more expensive than this, Chinese manufactured emulation handheld? I'm like, look, it's a North American manufactured ultra high end tribute to the Game Boy. I'm not trying to compete with those. I love all of that stuff. I had a GP2X and a GP32. I was putting custom firmware on my PSP.
Nice.
I've been into
that's
that stuff
old school emulation. That's even before us.
Dude, I loved all of I don't want to say I was totally OG, but yeah, no, like that was kind of the very, very start of the kind of Linux-based open source emulation handheld wave, and it was a tiny fraction of how it is today. You guys remember the Open Pandora? I think it's now the Dragon Box Pyra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like I was one of the first pre-orders for the Open Pandora, and I know you guys might remember it was this saga where it didn't deliver for years and years. I actually got one of the first Open Pandoras by hitting up the guys who are running the project in Germany and saying, hey, I'm down to take one of those units that has the busted analog sticks that you had from your prototype run. And so I actually got one of the very first Open Pandoras.
Just give me anything, yeah.
Yep, I was a fan. Like I also had a Nokia N800 MID, the mobile internet device, running Mamo, which was their Linux distro, and I built a gamepad frame for that. So I love all this stuff, and I love my Amber NIC, and I love my Analog Pocket, but again, the ModRetro Chromatic is really about making about ultimate tribute hardware. And I'll just be candid. We're going to be doing stuff other than the Game Boy. We're already working on our next few projects. All of those are in the same vein.
It's
not about making the thing that is, the cheapest thing, the most accessible thing. If you just want to spend $50 and do a pretty good job playing your NES games and your Neo Geo games, like you should do that.
So have you tried those cheap Chinese handhelds? Because we have a whole community on those.
I know. Like I said, I mean, I was addicted to that stuff a long time ago, and I still am. I can't help but collect all the gadgets. So I'm very familiar with them, and I think that's also kind of how I knew what I wanted the Chromatic to be. You could look and say, okay, this product makes sense from a reasoned perspective. Like I need to make something that is cheap, easy to manufacture, and I can get it out to hundreds of thousands of people. And that allows me to define what Chromatic is, which is very much not that.
Is there anything you wanted to do with the Chromatic but couldn't, just because of? I can imagine the answer is no, because of the money that you've thrown at it. But is there something that technology just couldn't do in that form factor? There were things that we had discussed doing, but I think we wanted to do them for brief periods, but I think never actually settled on it. Like one of the questions was, should we integrate a wireless modem into it that would allow you to do to build Game Boy games that have online play? Like we talked about, what if you built a little Iridium satellite communications module in it, so I could be, I don't even need to be where cell towers, I can play anywhere. The reason we decided against it is we were basically like, you know what? If you're going to play online games, it makes more sense to use a platform that already makes sense for that. We need to focus on making the ultimate Game Boy, not the ultimate Game Boy, and also this really interesting general purpose handheld. Because as a general purpose handheld, it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense looking at it as the most authentic way to play Game Boy and Game Boy Color cartridges. And so we really stuck to that. I will say one limitation, not on the tech side, not on the money side, but it was actually the intellectual property side. There's this interesting dynamic where anything that Nintendo patented with a functional patent, back when the Game Boy was still around, all of that is fair game for us to completely knock off and rip off, because that's the whole point of the patent system. It's a temporary period of exclusivity that the government is granting you to commercialize your idea in exchange for putting it into the public domain in the long run. And so anything that's in a patent is actually explicitly on the table for us to copy. And so that comes down to, for example, some of the radius decisions we made on the curvature of the shell. We were able to perfectly copy the original Game Boy. We were copying the DMG because that was actually part of the patent. The ratio of button size to button arc as your thumb rotates across the A and B face buttons, that was actually a functional patent that Nintendo got. And they said, ergonomically, this is the optimal average arc that your thumb should trace, between the A and the B versus, relative to this distance to the edge of the handheld. And so we were able to do that. However, there's other things that are not patented. They're part of Nintendo's trade dress. So they're trademarks, they're copyrights. And so there were things that I think would have done. I'll give you a really, really simple one. I definitely would have done the Chromatic logo as a holographic, basically, rainbow color stripe. Kind of a take on, the little Game Boy Color logo.
That would have been
cool. The reason we didn't is because Honestly, I think we could have done it, and I don't think it would have technically been violating. There would have been enough differences because it would have been metallic, because it would have been a different font. But we're like, look, their word is color. They actually have marks on that color mark and, the gradient of colors. And if I have a thing where, especially the word chromatic, literally referring to color, it's like, what? I need to make sure that I'm not just doing a thing where I could theoretically defend myself in a court of law. I need to make it where a Nintendo lawyer looks at this and says, "Yeah, like this is clearly fine." Because there's what you could do that would win in court, and then there's the thing you do that keeps you out of court.
Yeah.
And by the way, I wouldn't have any beef with Nintendo if they did have to go after me in that way. As someone who's been on both sides of the table, American intellectual property system in particular requires trademark holders to pursue and protect against violations. Otherwise, they can actually lose their mark, and lose the ability to license it. And so that one of the reasons that you see these aggressive things, people often imagine the lawyers are just like money grubbing and they hate fan games, they hate fan hardware. It really isn't that. It's that I've talked to these attorneys and they're like, man, I friggin' love this like Chrono Trigger fan game personally, but if we allow this to go out without sending a cease and desist, very good chance we end up losing our mark. And
I didn't know that.
That's different than Japan. Japan has a trademark system that's far superior to ours in this respect. The IP holders are allowed to enforce or not enforce and still maintain their rights, which is why you see so much fan work at things like Comic Cat. You see so much Dojin and fan games and fan works. It's because the IP holders are allowed to allow that stuff and not have to risk their mark. And anyway, this is a longer conversation, but suffice to say, thank goodness the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, got killed as a trade agreement because it was going to normalize copyright law between all of the signatories, including Japan. It was going to lock them into our intellectual property system, which actually would have forced them to enforce against all those fan works. So I'm so glad that trade deal fell apart all those years ago.
So let's keep on the game front, and I want to talk about you working with indie developers to launch new Game Boy games.
Yeah,
that's obviously something that's really important to you. I just want to chat to you about video game preservation as well as working with new indie developers, what they both mean to you, why they're both so important to you as a person and to the Chromatic as a handheld moving forward, really.
Well, I'm a big fan of game preservation. I have one of the world's largest video game software and hardware collections. There might be someone with a bigger one out there.
Hang on, just talk about that a second more. Let's have an interjection and talk about that for a second, because that sounds like something we need to know about.
Well, I bought it from the guy who had the Guinness World Record for the largest collection, and then I bought a bunch of stuff that he didn't have. And so that gets you to a pretty good place.
That gets you one up, yeah.
Yeah. I've got a whole scheme. I should probably come back and talk about it another time with you guys. But one of the things I'm doing is trying to build. I'm a big fan of living museums where people are actually able to access and play all of this stuff. But I think that the power of a living museum is that people can experience games as they were. Particularly on it. It's so different to play a retro game on like a modern LCD display with digital processing versus playing something on a CRT that was designed for a CRT, on the console it was designed for, on the handheld or on the controller it was designed for. I'm a big fan of people experiencing the past as it was, and that's especially hard for games because it's very easy for me to give someone, let's say, a book from 100 years ago and have them experience it as people experienced it 100 years ago. It's even quite easy to do it on the music side and to a lesser extent the film side. Games, it's very, very hard. And so now the downside of a living museum is that it degrades a lot of this stuff. You are wearing it down and you're wearing it out. And that's especially a problem when you're talking about things that are extremely rare. It's especially a problem when you're talking about letting kids deal with this stuff, not just like, I'll let you hold the controller gingerly for a moment, but like if you're going to allow them to be like swapping cartridges and plugging in, it's just a risk. And so kind of my dream, and this might not surprise you, given that I'm a virtual reality nut and everyone knows it. One of my dreams is to kind of try to combine the best of both worlds, to scan a lot of this stuff using extremely high resolution scanning technology to basically build a virtual living museum of retro games. So imagine if you could have ultra high resolution scans of the boxes, the manuals, the collectibles, the cartridges themselves, every
And
variant
I don't have
of
to
the
put
cartridge.
6 AA batteries into the Game Gear to play it.
Honestly, like, I believe that eventually VR is going to get good enough where you are going to have something that's roughly indistinguishable from reality. So people, they say, Palmer, you can't, but you know, the current Oculus Rift is so far from that real experience. And I have to point out to them, guys, it's not about where it is today. Like I'm thinking on a longer time scale, like break out decades. There's going to be VR that is more or less indistinguishable from reality, at least on the visual and audio side. Like there's a guy who's doing a virtual reality emulation system where it's actually simulating CRT displays to the point of literally, and it's drawing the pixel structure and it's drawing the internal reflections off the front of the glass vacuum tube in the CRT. Like that's the type of thing that you can only get usually with a living museum. So kind of my thinking here and collecting all of this stuff. Part of it is just collecting all of it, but a big part of this is I think preserving it in a way that's actually accessible to everybody. Like I think it would be really cool for people to be able to eventually experience everything that's ever been made, even things that are not practical, like pinball machines. Great example of something that's very expensive to keep running. And even if you had someone like, let's say you gave people 30 minutes on a pinball machine, right? Okay, that's a decent amount of time. That means that over the course of a year, maybe a couple thousand people could play the pinball machine, and that's it. It's just not scalable. It keeps this stuff as a plaything of the rich. And so you might be able to tell I've got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. There's people who are like, oh, well, that'll never be the same as the real deal. My point to them is, look, it doesn't matter if it's exactly the same as the real deal. It's a lot closer to the real deal than most people are practically ever going to be able to experience. It's like somebody who goes to vacation on the French Riviera every year saying, oh, well, you know, it's really just like if anywhere else in France, it's just not the same. You know, oh, you're only going for a few days. Oh, well, that's not the same as summering there. It's like, dude, like yes, it's true. If you're a rich enough person, you can afford to do that. It probably is better. But if you want, there's value in the thing that's accessible to everybody.
So have you got a team now that's doing all the scanning and creating those files in preparation for this?
So we've done some scans, and they're pretty impressive. Honestly, right now, my focus is on trying to preserve these things in a really good state and not allow them to degrade too much, because the scanning basically there's kind of this curve, right? Scanning technology is continuously getting better, but games in general are degrading as well. And so my goal is to try and, you know, you don't want to go to the effort of, let's say, scanning everything to a very high level of fidelity, and then 6 months later there's something that's double the resolution. Because otherwise, you'll be doing it over and over again, and that might sound like, oh, why don't you just do it? Well, actually, in some cases, the act of doing this is itself degrading the stuff. You know, like if I'm talking about, like, say, manuals, like if I'm opening them and I'm creasing them, like, I know this sounds totally anal and like, why would anyone even care? But if you're gonna do it right. Yeah. But like, if you have a manual that's been pressed in a box, literally the act of just opening the manual is actually stretching the fibers on the bind. And if you even do that, even like 10 times, these are cheap, crappy, you know, glossy prints from 30 years ago. You are going to have degradation in there. And so that's like most manuals that have been opened and used, they're actually not going to be representative of the original condition. Now, people say, but Palmer, don't you want people to experience how manuals actually looked? And I love that idea too. Like, I love the idea of having like different levels of degradation. Like, I want to be able to play with either a brand new Super Smash Brothers cartridge in VR, or I want to be able to play with a well-loved Super Smash Brothers cartridge. Like, I have a well-loved Super Smash Bros. Cartridge. That's what me and my buddies play with. I actually got it signed by Masahiro Sakurai when I saw him in Tokyo one time, and so that's pretty fun.
When you start working on that, we'd love to document
I'm thinking
it.
about the scanning.
if you're ever moving forward that, we'd love to like document it, or even like come over and again interview you personally, because that sounds like something that we'd love to chat about. And
100%.
preserving games is very important to us. We're actually tempted to go over to Embracer Archive in Sweden. Have you been there yet?
I've never been there, but I'm very familiar with it. I'm hoping that Embracer Group holds together long enough for that to to survive. Every time I hear news about them doing layoffs and shutterings, I wonder when the bean counters are going to get to the game archive.
Because then you can buy their collection.
Exactly. Yeah, you can make it even bigger.
It is. You're not the first person. You're not the first person to think about it.
Back to the games. What's your favorite game you're launching?
But honestly, my main interest in the Embracer collection is not just the games. It's actually the ancillary, like the game ancillaries. The publications and the magazines and the promotional materials and the trade show material. They actually have a lot of stuff that's not just the games, and a lot of that stuff is truly one-offs or two-offs, and there's not that much of it out there. Like one of my other dreams is that people would be able to like, and we'll get there at some point, but I would like, for example, to be able to, well, I'll give you an example. So one of the things that I did for the 10th anniversary of the launch of the Oculus Rift DK1 was I ran a party. It was invitation only for OGs, people who are around, and anyone could give an invite, but we were like trying to keep it to people who are around back in the old days of Oculus and VR. And so me and one of my Oculus co-founders, Joe Chen, we actually scanned all of the. So I have some of the original Oculus trade show booths. I stole them when I left Facebook, and
how'd you steal a booth, man? That's quite a big thing to steal, right?
It is a series of crazy stories. But you're right. How do you steal a
drones
booth?
came in handy.
But what we did
do
is
a whole episode on that, just on that alone, man, next time.
So me and Joe actually set up all the booth panels, and we had a cool booth like at GDC 2013, which is where we launched the Oculus Rift DK1 and DK2. So we took the DK2 booth. And there was a line around it for demos the whole time, and we let people scribble on it with Sharpie. And so there was just all kinds of cool little sketches and comics and all kinds of stuff people had written on it. So we took that booth, we scanned all of the furniture, all of the panels, all of the computers, everything, and then we actually built a perfect replica of the Oculus GDC booth, our first GDC booth. And we put it into VR chat, and that's where we had the meeting. So we were all meeting up, and we were hanging. We took the booth, and then we dropped it into the Oculus test environment that we used called Tuscany. It was kind of the like Hello World developer sample that we included with the headset. So we dropped the booth just sitting there on a lawn, and we all used it. One of the other things I'm interested in doing is like Embracer Group has some of these like E3 promotional materials from like old booths at E3. One of the things I would love to do is actually recreate old instances of E3, like because like we have video footage. Sometimes we have the real materials, and maybe even if you couldn't do something perfect, I feel like some mix of real scans, AI, and human
you could
touch.
sell tickets back. You could sell tickets to E3 like 20 years ago.
I hadn't even thought about selling tickets. That's fine, but like that's the idea. Like, how cool would it be to go to E3? And also remember, you guys probably know this. You might even have some of them. There's a lot of these E3 prototype cartridges that have come out now, and people have started to dump all of those things. And a lot of those are just now becoming available. But like, imagine this. Imagine if you could go back to like E3 99, walk around the virtual E3, and then play the leaked Star Fox Virtual Boy prototype on a Virtual Boy at E3. I mean, that would be the coolest shit ever.
That would be incredible.
And so I feel like preserving that stuff while all of the, like right now, all the people who are there are actually still around, right? Like I can go ask questions of the people who ran that booth. I can go ask questions of the guy who built, I hadn't even thought of that. Although I'll tell you that's going to lead to some controversy because in the 90s, all the E3 booths had booth babes, and you're not supposed to have booth babes anymore.
I'll go
on the record. I don't know what you guys are willing to say, but I think booth babes are great, and every booth babe I've ever met also thinks that they were great. when CES banned booth babes, there were so many women who were so pissed because they made an enormous amount of money. Basically, they're like, yeah, I'm like a model. Like
Just
usually I
standing
get paid to work in Vegas and like just look nice. And E3 or CES, I just go there and I wear the Samsung shirt. And then they pay me $50 an hour to stand around and talk to people about their new phone. Like I'll tell you this: women were not the beneficiaries of the anti-booth babe policy. But I'm willing to say what not everyone else is willing to say.
I would go back and find out why they never released Cabbage for the N64. It's been one of my things that I've thought about my entire life.
Sorry, why they never released what?
Cabbage. It was supposed to be for the 64DD, and it was this game that they were going to bring out, but they never actually did it. And it's been one of those things that I've thought about my entire life. It was kind of going to be like a precursor to Animal Crossing, and then Animal Crossing came from that. But I remember reading about it in Nintendo Official Magazine, and it never came to light. There was always little teases, never any gameplay footage, anything. So I would go back and do that, and I'd be like just searching anywhere for like a crumb or like a little leaflet about this game so I could finally put it to rest.
Well, maybe that's something we'll have to try to track down. I feel the same way about like Earthbound 64 or Mother 64, but I mean like that, and that got supposedly they had like the game a third done and a whole bunch of stages and that was another one where they had some press demos, but I think they didn't have any public demos. But I would love to go back and do that. Fun fact, this is a total digression, but as far as I can tell, did you know that I think Animal Crossing for Nintendo 64 might be the very first game to have a Let's Play made about it?
Interesting.
Are you familiar with the internet personality Christian Weston Chandler?
No, it doesn't ring a bell personally.
I don't think I am.
Well, you should. But he was. He's a bit of an internet personality who's well known for supposedly being the most well-documented person on the entire internet. I don't know how true that really is, but that's the way that the fandom kind of markets itself. Anyway, he uploaded videos of himself playing. Like he was doing like through a video capture card into a VHS recorder. He was actually recording himself playing Animal Crossing, talking about what he's doing and what the game is. And people had done that like in a promotional context, of course. You could see that, but in terms of just like a normal person playing a game while talking a talk track over it, talking about the game and other random things. As far as we could tell, that was the first Let's Play by what you would use for most modern definitions of a Let's Play.
I'm watching that tonight.
Anyway,
straight away.
Look up Chris Chan Animal Crossing Let's Play, and just watch. And it's so funny to watch it and compare it with like the highly produced streamer content that we have today. And you're like, wow, crazy how far we've come. But it was a pain in the ass back then to do that, like to record yourself playing while talking and then get it into a digital file. Like this was pre-YouTube. He was uploading it to his personal website, just like uploading .avi video files of him playing Animal Crossing.
That is serious dedication.
Oh yeah, you had to work at it back then.
So we've only got about 5 or 10 minutes left on the pod, so I just want to round off. What is the future of Mod Retro? Have you got any information that you could share with us, and maybe even if it's like exclusive, so we can finally outrank IGN on at least one story in our life?
Well, let's see. I mean, the future of Mod Retro. I mean, the future of Mod Retro is the past. We're gonna keep
forums, baby.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so true. I love PHP forums, although we're running on Zen 4.0 now. But look, forums are fantastic. I really think the internet has truly lost something with the rise of social media and like Reddit and Facebook groups and Twitter pages as the centralized points. Like there's something about the asynchronous nature, and also where it's no upvotes, no downvotes. Your position in the conversation is dictated by your willingness to participate in it. You'll have a guy who says, the popular guy says his bit, and then you could have some guy who says, I think you're full of shit. And they're on an equal playing field right there in the thread. And that's something that's really been lost. And I'm bummed about it all the time. So I feel like we agree on that. But the future is the past, I think, in terms of like doing, I think, first of all, is going to be games. Like we've announced some of the games that are coming out for Chromatic. There's going to be more indie games. There's going to be more games from major studios. And
going to be resurrecting some old ones, right? Maybe.
We're resurrecting some old ones, and some of those are games that are old games that were just popular that are very hard to buy now. Like they're like crazy expensive on eBay because
Like
there's
the
not
potato
enough
one.
copies.
What's the potato one? The Game Boy game that's just like
Spud's
800 bucks.
Adventure. Spud's Adventure.
So we'll see. But I we're focused on mostly the things that people, where there's a lot of, like, we don't just want to re-release games that are rare and expensive because they're rare. Like we want to do the ones where there's a lot of people out there who want to play them, and that's why, like, we want to re-release the games that are rare because there's so many people who want them versus rare because they didn't make that many copies. But one of the other things we're doing that is really cool, and we're working with a couple of the large developers that I have a lot of old connections with from the Oculus days. We're actually looking at re-releasing, or I guess first time releasing games that were never actually launched, and in some cases never even announced back in the 90s and early 2000s. There's actually some Game Boy games where they either were partially finished or even fully finished games where they didn't launch them because, well, variety of reasons. Sometimes, like, one of these games is a game where it started development on the Game Boy Color and it was going to launch on Game Boy Color, but then they decided that it wasn't worth launching on Game Boy Color. They were instead going to port the whole project to Game Boy Advance because everyone, like, the Game Boy Advance was going to be coming out in a year. They would rather launch on that and put their marketing dollars into that. They didn't want to basically, have to market it twice. And so, like, that's one of the games we're looking at. There's another one where it's a game that was fully completed development, but then it was deemed to be too controversial, and the publisher just dropped out, never published the game. And so now we're actually bringing some games like that. So I'm really excited about that, to actually take these pieces of history where before nobody was able to play it, and now finally they'll be part of the record.
Maybe you can put some time into finding out about Cabbage as well, then, and together we can make this N64 DD game a reality. This is what I've been waiting for, Brandon, my entire life.
We got to make it happen. I mean, I am curious. How tied to this game was Nintendo? Was it like a full third-party thing, or was there like collaboration with Nintendo or an affiliate studio?
It was supposed to be something that they were working on themselves for the 64 DD, and then when they turned their efforts to the GameCube, they kind of stopped making it. I spent weeks kind of looking at all the details about this for an article that we did on the website, and it was just like, going down old Japanese magazines and down rabbit holes to try to find snippets of information. It just seems to be that it was like a meeting of three to four different people who were working at Nintendo. You had Miyamoto there, you had Iwata there. They were all working on stuff together, but then they kind of all just, like, it was like too quick, too much, too soon, and they all kind of just thought, too many ideas. We can't do it now. We don't have the technology to do what we want to do now. So they kind of took little aspects from it and broke off and made different games from that. And I think one of them being Animal Crossing being one of those ones that it kind of evolved into.
Well, I'm going to have to look into it. I'll tell you, the reason I ask is because the games where Nintendo had an official involvement as a publisher or as potentially like something, they would fund some of these games partially or do advances on them. And if that's the case, it's very, very hard to track anything down. Like, there's a lot of leaked stuff out there. Anything to do, like, if it actually officially touches Nintendo, there's a lot of reticence even today. I've had a lot of conversations with Japanese developers where they're like, dude, anything else? Like Mega Man? No problem. We'll leak all of this in-dev crap back then. But you're talking about a Nintendo property? No, man, I'm not touching that with a 100-foot pole. They are... Like, Nintendo is the Disney of Japan in that way. Like, people are very loath to upset them. But yeah, getting back to the future, like,
hardware, any hardware
are the near term. But then I think the other thing is going to be releasing new hardware, and it's going to be very much in the same vein. It's not building the cheapest thing. It's not building the kind of best balance of factors. It's saying, what is the ultimate version of this thing? It is the heirloom tribute that will stand the test of time. Hopefully in 10 years, people look back and say, hopefully in 100 years, they look back and say, yep, that was the pinnacle. That was the end of it. Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff we're working on. You could probably guess what we're working on.
Well, I'm thinking about it. I want to keep asking them, yeah.
But, like, I'll give you an example of something we're not working on right now, but we've talked about. But, like,
don't say Game Gear.
Yeah, don't say Game Gear, honestly, because he'll cry forever.
So we've talked about, and by the way, we're not doing this, so that's why it's a safe example.
Okay.
We've talked about doing a Laserdisc player.
Oh, cool.
And that'd be really cool. But we said, if we're going to do this, it's not just going to be a Laserdisc player. It is going to be the Laserdisc player. It's going to be the thing like the Wikipedia page is going to say, and the last Laserdisc player was, the ModRetro Laser Boy. And it was, it was noted as the pinnacle of Laserdisc technology. And it was the very best one that there ever is. And it supported every weirdo format and all the non-standard disc sizes and had built-in denoising to compensate for disc rot. And, that's the type of that's the way that we're looking at this stuff. But we'll see what's coming next. Some of the things we've talked about today are maybe hints.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, I appreciate your time.
I got one more thing I got to throw out there. I got to do this. I just got to shill for a second. I got to give a big shout out to our corporate partner, GameStop. They're the exclusive retail partner of ModRetro, and that to me that is such a cool accomplishment all on its own because so I've been through this before. Actually, the Oculus Rift also launched with GameStop on launch day, and I'll tell you, to grow up going to GameStop, buying Super Smash Brothers at GameStop on
are you doing a midnight launch as well? Did I read that right?
It is true. No, I would go to lots of different midnight launches for franchises I like because they're like little mini conventions, right?
Absolutely.
You're there in the parking lot of the GameStop, and there's like 30 guys who all love Super Smash Brothers. And like in one case, somebody had obtained an early copy like from someone who broke Street Date. And so the parking lot was full of guys playing the new Super Smash Brothers.
Amazing.
Waiting for the new Super Smash Brothers to come out. And then we all bought it when we went home and we played more Super Smash Brothers. It's just so cool. And so as someone who grew up with GameStop and buying my games in GameStop, pre-ordering, the Chrono Trigger remake for Nintendo DS and going to GameStop and getting my free poster and CD, to actually be on, in retail like that, I think is really cool. I think it's actually one of the things that ModRetro has. I think it's one of the things that indie developers have found most interesting about ModRetro. We're not going to people, and it's so funny. I've seen people speculating Palmer Luckey's going and he's buying out all these indie devs and he's just buying them all up, and that's why they're releasing with ModRetro. I'm like, okay, first of all, there's not enough money in Game Boy games for there to be much money floating around anyway. But we're actually not buying people out. We're just giving them halfway reasonable terms. Most of the terms, I won't name names, most of the terms for these retro publishers are somewhere between extortionate and incompetent. And it's because a lot of people don't have experience with mass manufacturing millions of units. So it costs them a lot to make the boxes, a lot to make the cartridges, and then they need to pay all their bills on top of it. And we're just offering good publishing deals. But I think one of the unique things we're offering is, hey, we can get you into GameStop, into a physical retailer. For a lot of indie devs, that's a dream come true to go from a fan indie project to being on a shelf in a store where physically your kids, other kids can go and buy that thing with their own hands. My argument has been that GameStop itself is kind of a pinnacle retro experience itself. The experience of going to GameStop is it triggers those same neurons as firing up Mario Party on N64, at least in my brain.
Yeah. That's such an awesome thing to do, and I think it brings back nostalgia in a more physical way, which we all want deep down. I'll round off the podcast there, Palmer. Thank you very much for joining us. Where can people snag your handhelds and games?
So right now you can pre-order them on GameStop.com, we actually have an exclusive GameStop colorway. So if you want the gray model, you have to go to GameStop. You can also pre-order on ModRetro.com. We're going to be shipping this December, and if you want to buy one in person, then the only place you can go is GameStop. And if people are interested in getting one, I'm not saying this because I want your money. I don't want to. Just in case people didn't fully grasp, I'm literally a billionaire. I have billions of dollars. I do not need people's money. So this is a bit of a weird shill, but if you want it, act fast, because if you pre-order now, you're guaranteed to get one this year, and we are not sure how many we're going to do of this initial run of chromatics. And like we might do more runs in the future, but if you want to get your hands on this, I would not necessarily. I know the memes, I know the rules. Don't pre-order. Wait for the reviews. But I'm just letting you know. In this case, I would not necessarily assume that is going to happen, given that we're only going to be making so many of these. And I wouldn't want somebody to say, "Oh, I'll just wait till January or February," and then say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. Palmer isn't doing another run of this, sapphire encrusted magnesium Game Boy." I want people to know that I gave them fair warning, and they know that we might be putting our resources into what's coming next rather than doing more of this. We'll have to see.
Thank you. What is coming next? It's got to be the advance, isn't it?
It's got to be the advance.
Well, so okay. Look. Let me ask this. Maybe we can end on this. What do you guys want to be next? And if it's the advance, what about the advance? Because I will tell you, if I do an advance, people have said, "Oh, well, why even?" People have said, "Oh, well, why would you do an advance?" And for me, the answer is clear. It's because it would have to be the best way to play Game Boy Advance games, right?
I think that's what I'd say. I want to buy a Game Boy Advance that I don't ever have to buy again. And I'm going through a lot of handhelds. I don't know if you've seen this one. I'll quickly grab it.
Yeah,
it's the Neo Pocket Micro, made with metal. Like, it is fucking lovely, but I don't want to buy another one. And this is $250. It's up there, but I need to buy another one.
Yep. Well,
I don't want to buy another one.
I will say, like, one of the things, like, we're making it where you won't need to buy replacements for this stuff. Like, one of the reasons we use AA batteries with an optional rechargeable pack is because we want you to be able to use this in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. A lot of these systems, like I don't know how, like, pull that out again and take a look. Like, is it screwed together or is it glued together?
Screwed.
All right, well, thank goodness. So at least you can replace the battery down the road. But of course, how many people, like me or you, might be willing to, open up our handhelds, track down a compatible lithium polymer cell, and install it properly with the proper level of pressure so that it won't puff up? But like, ordinary people are not in that situation necessarily. So I didn't want to make something that's going to end up being e-waste in the future. But okay, so you think we should do GBA and have it be the last GBA so that you don't have to keep buying stuff to play Game Boy.
Do the classic
games.
Metal shell, beautiful screen, put some crystals on that bitch, and just do what I think you've done with the Chromatic. I haven't got my hands on one, but from what I've seen,
I will tell you, I talked about how, like, the Chromatic was born of what I wanted to do, not what made sense. Like, I wanted to make the ultimate Game Boy Color, because that's what I grew up with. I will tell you, our market research, at least on the handheld side, Game Boy Advance is at the top of the list. Everyone wants it. I mean, we get emails all the time when we've run anonymized kind of surveys where people don't even know what ModRetro is. Like, Game Boy Advance seems to be the thing. So I'll tell you, it makes sense for us to do. I mean, look, I'll give you this as a non-IGN exclusive. We're certainly going to end up doing Game Boy Advance someday. It's just a matter of the priority list, right? Like, the fun thing about retro consoles is Game Boy Advance isn't going anywhere, right? If I wait 10 years to do this, it's not like I'm going to be late to the boat, The Game Boy Advance is the Game Boy Advance, but it's a matter of priorities. But it's going to happen at some point, because I'm a big Game Boy Advance fan too, and I'm not Look, there's lots of systems that can play Game Boy Advance and emulate it well, and that's great. But the ergonomics are not optimized for Game Boy Advance games. The button layouts are not optimized for Game Boy Advance games. The type of D-pad is not, necessarily representative of the same, kind of pivot feel as the original Game Boy Advance. And actually, I don't know if you know this, but something that's interesting about between the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Advance SP, did you know that most variants of the Game Boy Advance SP, they actually don't use a red, green, blue display. They use a blue, green, red striped display. That's right.
Interesting.
There's actually a different pixel structure. And so there were developers who would have to decide, am I targeting the original Game Boy Advance hardware or the better selling Game Boy Advance SP hardware in terms of what will, like, is my art optimized for one or the other? And so this is actually a question we've had to ask ourselves. If we do a Game Boy Advance, do you replicate the original Game Boy Advance and its pixel structure, or do you replicate the Game Boy Advance SP, which had not, a different pixel structure, it had a different color temperature, different color gamut. It's actually a quite hard question to answer, and so
there's a lot to think about. Yeah, massively.
We're trying to figure it out. I'm in one of my crazy ideas would be something like a switchable display where it basically offsets the image between the two, and actually, so you can actually have both on one thing, or a switchable color filter. But honestly, nobody cares enough about this stuff to bother doing any of it, but I care, so we're going to do it right.
I appreciate that, Palmer. Thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute privilege, and we love what you do and keep on doing it. And we both look forward to having your console in our hands to take a look at.
I can't wait to get you guys a Chromatic. I guarantee you're going to like it. Man.
We can't wait. We can't wait to test it out in the flesh.
Casey and Logan with one. I'm actually meeting Casey in a couple of weeks, actually, because I'm in New York City. So if I might have to swing by his office.
See if you can beg a few minutes off of him.
Yeah, we'll do. Anyway, Palmer, thank you so much. Super appreciate it.
Cheers, man.
Bye, guys.